I'm Gordon Masson. I'm the editor of IQ magazine. We're a trade magazine for the live music industry. We only have half an hour here, so I'm going to let Beverley introduce herself and give you a little presentation about the Music Venue Trust, which is a fantastic idea. Beverley.
Thanks, Gordon. I'm here today to talk to you about the other bit of the music industry, the small venues. And as you're all aware, it's a very hard time for small venues across the UK. Many of them are closing, many of those that are still operating are endangered for a variety of reasons. But one of the main reasons is that small venues tend to be in city centres and town centres. As the economy goes along, a lot of these buildings are now worth more for their value as buildings and not actually for the activity that goes on inside them. And this is a problem that we've been researching and over the last year been talking to a lot of people to try and get a consensus as to what we can do to try and help small independent venues. There's a lot that's wonderful about independent venues. Their strangeness, their character. However, their very independence means that they're not represented by any one organisation or body. There's no consensus. They're not consulted on things. So, in January this year, we've launched the Music Venue Trust. And first of all, I'm going to explain who we are, then I'm going to explain what it is that we're going to do. So, Music Venue Trust is made up of trustees. Jeremy Mills is our legal representative. He's a specialist in charity law and is on the board of Nordhoff Robbins. Then we've got myself. I'm actually from an arts background. I have recently been working in music, but I've worked in arts development for a long time. Then we also have Chris Prosser, who is the director of the ILMC, the International Live Music Conference, and also head of suspicious marketing. So he's our marketing guy. Next, we have Jason Dorman. Jason is one of the partners in the Tunbridge Wells Forum, which a couple of years ago I think was the NME's best live venue. And Jason also runs a chain of public houses, so he knows about running buildings. Then we've got Sybil Bell. Last year, Sybil, along with Joe, set up the Independent Venue Week, which is a festival celebrating independent venues. Sybil's also very hot on networking and marketing, and she's done promoting as well. And then last and not least, we have Mark David, who, despite the rather disreputable photo, is actually the chief executive of a charity that runs music workshops for young people in the southeast of England called Rhythmics. He's also a partner in the Tunbridge Wells Forum, and he's also the CEO of the Music Venue Trust. So, as you can see, we've brought together some real expertise of the music industry. Everybody has an aspect of the industry they've worked in for years. And all of these people have written rather wonderful statements, which you can see on our website, you'll see the address at the end, as to why they believe an organisation is needed to safeguard the future of small independent venues. So that's us working on it. And then we've got the people that are helping us by being our patrons. And in order to push the project forward, we needed to get some political support. So thus far, we've not been able to have the meetings we need in Scotland, but what we have got are the politicians representing the three major parties in the UK. Kerry McCarthy is a Labour MP for Bristol. Mike Weatherly is the Conservative MP for Hove. And last but not least, we have Lord Tim Clement-Jones, who's a Lib Dem peer and was instrumental in pushing forward the Live Music Act in England. So all of these people have been very vocal about the importance of music for audiences. We also have support from the music industry, from major agents, the likes of Jeff Meal, who's a partner in the agency group. We have Scott Thomas, who is a partner in X-Ray Touring, and Paul Buck, who is a partner in Coda. So, politicians think the project's a good idea, the industry thinks the project's a good idea. Perhaps more importantly, we also have a number of artists that have put their name to the project and what it is we want to do. We have Savages. Jenny Beth has been very vocal about the need for support for independent venues. David Gedge from The Wedding Present spent most of his career playing small venues, travelling around. He also is extremely vocal in his support, as is Jeremy Pritchard from Everything Everything. We're also represented by up-and-coming artists such as Moya, who rather wonderfully said, the importance of social media is one thing, but a like on Facebook certainly is not the same as the connection you can make with someone in a small venue. At another side of the career, we've got Andy Dunlop from Travis, who obviously has come some way from the small venues, but Andy is giving his support, as are Enter Shikari. So if you want to see about what any of these people have said and why they're supporting it, please do visit our website. Okay, so that's the people. So now what's the plan? When you talk about safeguarding the future of small music venues, there are hundreds of opinions of what is needed. We are aware of these, we've listened to these, we've been asked to join lots of networking groups, we've been asked to be on panels, we've been asked to do this and that, and they're all great ideas. But in order to be a trust that could actually make a difference, what we decided to do is focus on a very practical plan. And this is to use existing legislation. I'm going to talk about England for a minute, and then I'll explain how this relates to Scotland, because we had to start with one area. As Gordon and I were just saying, it's quite complicated now to do national projects because there are different pieces of legislation in Scotland, in Wales, in England, and in Northern Ireland. So we have started with England, not because we think it's more important, but just because it gives us a workable model that we'll then be able to adapt to make it work for Scotland and afterwards for Wales. So I'm going to explain a bit what that is. We are currently asking for venue champions to come forward. What a venue champion is a person who loves going to their local small music venue, who thinks that that venue is important. And we are asking venue champions to identify other local people that will help them to sign an application for their venue to be listed as an asset of community value. Now, this is, as I say, an English legislation that has been used for safeguarding pubs in England, because Gordon's just said to me, pubs don't really close in Scotland, but in England, a lot of pubs are closing. And if you can identify a building of an asset of community value, you've then got more chance of the community being involved in an opportunity to stop that venue being sold to become something else. There are many, many examples of venues like the Picture House here, which has just become a Wetherspoons pub. In the Princess Charlotte in Leicester is an iconic toilet circuit venue that was knocked down recently and is going to become flats. You've got the Night and Day in Manchester that's in trouble. You've got others that have become laser zones or offices. We want to protect these buildings. We want to keep them as music venues by getting a building listed as an asset of community value. What that means is if the owner of the building puts it up for sale, the local group that got it listed will be told and will have time to come to the trust to say, can you put in a bid? And our plan is to identify a network of buildings around the UK that people believe are important. And once we've got those buildings identified, we can go to funding organisations such as the Heritage Lottery or to individuals that maybe believe in music and can philanthropically give us some money. And we can buy those buildings, lease them back to the operators, with the only condition being that they are run in the future as a music venue. So the idea is to identify buildings, get them publicly recognised as places of merit for their music, not just their structure, but for their music. So the first thing is to get them identified by the champions. The next thing is to audit them, get them recognised in some way and listed. We have a lot of organisations. You can see this is acronym fantastic, of all the types of organisations that we've so far had meetings with. People that have listened to this plan and think it's workable and have said that they will get on board with it. And then the final part of it would be to raise the funding locally and nationally to actually buy these buildings and lease them to the current operators. Now, I have to come back to Scotland. The bit that's missing there in Scotland is the asset of community value legislation is English specific. In a way, that doesn't matter because it's not actually the certificate that's important. What's important is the process. The fact that people are saying, we think this place is important, and they're saying it publicly, and they're looking for recognition of that. Because the other thing that very much undermines small music venues is they tend to be seen by people in authority as sort of marginalised, sort of slightly dodgy activity. When I worked as a local government arts officer, the place in which I worked had its council-owned theatre, it had an arts centre, and it had an independent music venue. And the attitude was very much that, like, oh, you don't want to deal with those guys down at the music venue because they're, you know, young guys that just drink a lot and take some drugs and they don't really know what they're doing. The arts centre was terribly respectable. And obviously the council venue, well, that was part of what we did. But the hilarious thing was that while I was working in that area, it was the guys down at the music venue that actually got lottery funding because they were just as entitled as everyone else to apply for it, and they put in a damn good bid. And they were proper arts people, and they did a proper job of it. But there's still that perceptive problem that people that run music venues are still seen as marginal. It's not an arts venue, and part of what we want to do as the Music Venue Trust is go, actually guys, yes it is. Small music venues are as much a part of the arts infrastructure of the UK as your arts centres, as your theatres, as your dance spaces. And they need that recognition because they're being forced to deal with the same legislations in terms of licensing, health and safety, insurance issues, but they're still not being given the support that the rest of the arts sector is. So through identifying and hopefully eventually buying these buildings, we're also hoping to give a voice to the independent operators. We don't want to make it corporate. We don't want to take the buildings over. We value the individuality of the people that run these buildings, of their connection with the local audience. What we want to do is help them to continue doing that by taking away the threat of the only way to pay my mortgage would be to sell this building to be a Pizza Hut. So that's who we are. We're very, very young. We only started in January this year. What we're doing at the moment is going around gathering support, talking to people about how they might get involved and what they can do to help us achieve these goals over 5 years. It's a slow plan, but over 5 years to help to continue our small venues by safeguarding their future. Thank you.
Okay. So let's say this is up and running. Say it's up and running in Scotland as well as England. Let's take England as the scenario you know at the moment.
Okay.
If I know of a venue that I would like to save, what do I physically have to do?
The first thing to do is to email us there. We've started to get emails in from people in towns and cities to say, I really love this venue, what do I do? We have an information sheet which we send out, basically detailing what I've just told you about how the asset of community value process works. And I'm currently putting together a pack that we would send to people. If somebody comes forward as a venue champion, what they're basically saying is that over the next few months, they'll put aside some time to talk to other people in the area, to get some signatures on a form, and to print out and sign the nomination form for that venue and submit it to the local council. It doesn't involve any fundraising. It doesn't involve anything like that, but it is going to be a time commitment. It's going to be an identifiable person in a local community that is leading the call for that building, that venue, to be identified as important.
So does that involve a petition of any kind then?
No, it's not really a petition. There is a nomination form and a signatory form, but what we've suggested is that by holding a couple of local meetings, by doing a little bit of local press work, which we're going to provide a lot of the resources for, it should be quite easy to get together the people to do it. In England, actually, you only need 21 signatures. It may be that in Scotland, as we work through the niceties of the differences here, that we find that something would have a lot more weight if it was 500 signatures. Because without that certificate of being an asset of community value, it may be that we have to work a bit harder to prove that there's a community behind it. But I mean, we all know that the audiences in these venues actually are quite active audiences, and it shouldn't really be a problem. It's more a process of formalising what we already know happens, because to a large extent, the problem the independent venues have is they're pretty much invisible. I mean, our chief exec, Mark, was actually told in the House of Lords by Lord Tim Clement-Smith that when legislation was being changed in England for live music, independent venues just weren't consulted. And when Mark said to him, well, why is that? And he said, well, we didn't know who to ask, because they don't have a representative body. Now, obviously in Scotland, you have the SMIA, so that helps in a way. But what we need to do is really work out who the key players are in all of this and give a way to come together to talk about small venues specifically. You know, we want to be very focused. We're doing just this one thing.
How quickly would I have to move then if my local place where I go and see a gig maybe it's under threat from a developer or something? If that's already in process, am I too late, or can I do something about it?
I think that depends whether the sale has gone through. If a sale hasn't gone through, then we could push the application forward quite quickly for somewhere to be listed or to be recognised. In England, again, if you do achieve the asset of community value status, if the owner of the building does then put it up for sale, what happens is there's a moratorium on the sale because the public have to be informed that it's been put up for sale, and there is a period in which, initial period of 6 weeks for some response, and then if the person that put in the application for ACV says, oh yes, somebody else is interested in buying it, it's then a 6-month moratorium before the sale can go through to anyone. But what that doesn't do is guarantee that a charity or a local group or anyone else can buy it, but what it does do is give a period in which to put a competitive bid forward.
Okay. Let's switch it on its head. Let's say I own a venue, I'm running a venue, I'm fed up with it. My venue as a kind of going concern is maybe worth £250,000. Mm-hmm. A developer comes along and says, I'll give you £1 million, we'll knock the venue down, we'll build some flats. Why wouldn't I go for that?
I'm so pleased you said £1 million, that makes it so much easier for me. Okay, you wouldn't go for that because we can make you a better offer.
Okay.
And the reason for that is that we have negotiated with central government on issues of capital gains and stamp duty, which would make the Music Venue Trust bid better than a corporate developer. So, excuse me, I have to consult my notes because I'm not so hot on the figures. If the venue has a notional value of £1 million, if the commercial company buys it for £1 million, round about 25% of that money that you would get would disappear as capital gains tax. And another chunk of it would disappear as stamp duty. What we've had agreed is that there would be a deferment of capital gains tax on the Music Venue Trust's purchase. Now, what that doesn't mean is that nobody's liable for it. What it means is the responsibility for paying capital gains tax goes to the Music Venue Trust rather than the vendor, and that only if the Music Venue Trust disposes of that asset, which we have no intention of ever doing because we want it to be a music venue forever, would the capital gains tax become payable. Okay. So, if a commercial company offered you £1 million and you knew you were going to lose at least £250,000 of that the minute you agreed to it, if the Music Venue Trust came and said, we can't offer you £1 million, but we could offer you 800,000, you'd actually make more money.
And I still get to run the place.
And we could then lease it back to you.
Okay.
And what that would also mean is that if it was owned by a charity, there would be a number of legal and financial things that would mean your running costs would be lower.
Right. Any questions from the floor? Is this a UK-specific problem, or is it happening overseas as well?
There are problems overseas, and I know that when Mark presented at the ILMC, he had a couple of guys, one from Belgium and one from Holland, I think, come to him and say, oh, please come and do this in our country. I mean, the way the music industry is changing is obviously causing enormous problems for many components of it, I don't need to tell you. I think times are hard, and we're all in this state of flux. There's a slightly different picture in countries such as France, where there's government funding. But I've read articles about how that's good and bad as well. We're focusing on the UK now, but there are networks. I mean, we do some work internationally too, and we will be very open to looking at models from elsewhere. But what we've come up with, we think, is a plan for trying to do something across the UK. So that's what we're going to try and do.
And what do you need to get the ball rolling in Scotland then?
In Scotland specifically, what we need is some meetings with some key people, hence the fact I'm here, because it's a great place to meet other music industry contacts. We're going to need to have meetings with Scottish Government and Creative Scotland and the SMIA to work out how we slot in and how we do things specifically for Scotland, because obviously you can't have a UK network without Scotland. It's such an important part of the touring map. And then what we also specifically need is a venue champion for a venue in Scotland that we can use as our test case for working out, without that ACV legislation here, what can we do to strongly support a Scottish venue and put it on our map of important venues. So we basically need someone that's prepared to work with us to find out how to do it properly in Scotland. It could be one venue, it could be 2 or 3. It'd be fantastic if it was, Edinburgh, Glasgow, Dundee, for example, or it can be much smaller towns too, doesn't have to be the major cities. But we want people to work with us through the process, to have a bit of patience in Scotland, because, as I say, we only launched in January, so we're all kind of trying to work through this together. But somebody who feels passionately that they've got a venue near to them that they would like to help to try and survive.
Yeah, Olaf, get your finger out.
This is a good start, Olaf, thanks.
Any other questions? Oh, here we go. Hi, who are you?
Hi, my name's Heather. I work at Summerhall down the road. I'm curious as to the process once you've bought this venue. What happens to the organisation? Do you take over and run it? Is there a structure you're going to apply across all these venues? What are you going to do?
Okay, we definitely do not want to run the venues. What we want to be is the identifiable hub of, if something comes through, like the Live Music Act that happened in England, we want to be the place that government or whoever else would come to when they say, we need to know the views of independent venues. After we've acquired a network of venues and leased them back to people that are going to run each of them, what we would basically be is the sort of the networking base. We would be the central communication point. But what we could also potentially be is the means to share information between the venues, soundproofing, noise limiters, all of these hideous issues that are coming up now where city centre flats are built and then somebody moves in and complains to the council that it's really noisy, and they go, yeah, it's a music venue. The trouble is each venue in isolation is dealing with these issues at the moment because there's no supportive network of how do they all really talk to each other, how do they deal with this together. Improvements to facilities, improvements in dealing with licensing, insurance companies, all of these things. If we had a network that were connected in a more formalised way, if they were owned by the trust and leased through them, these issues would be much easier to deal with on an ongoing basis. So beyond the 5-year plan that was presented as, what we'd like to do about acquiring buildings, that is the potential future of the trust and its role. But no, we definitely don't want to run your venues. Thank you.
What if I'm running my venue a massive loss and it's part of the trust? Are you able to deal with that, or will that network, can you plug into that network and get a promoter to go to all those venues to maybe prop them up? What happens if I start making loads and loads of losses?
That's a very interesting question.
Thank you.
And it's one that would need to be referred to Jason or Mark, because again, it's really not my expertise. I would hope that being part of a network would obviously offer some advantages in terms of support and advice, but that's a real unknown at the moment. But again, anyone who has a question that I can't answer, please email it to us and I will get somebody that can answer it to deal with it. We're trying to bring in as many bits, as many levels, agencies of the music industry as possible, as well as the politicians and the musicians, and to get consensus that what we're doing is a workable part of trying to help with the smaller venues. For Scotland, we have work to do still with the fact that you have a different arts council, you have a different government. We're big on collaboration. We will talk to whoever we need to talk to work out what any changes mean to the current picture and to utilise that information to adjust what we're doing to make sure that it's as relevant as it can be to whatever the political or economic situation is.
Great. So if any of you fancy being a champion, I guess grab Beverley in the bar afterwards. But in the meantime, can we thank her for coming along today? It's been really interesting.